We have always thought that if a county were to take the time and energy to start a judicial lawsuit to try and foreclose, there has been an excess in neglect, an excess in intention. They basically feel like that property has been neglected to a point where it's never going to solve itself. Title issues or not, that they want to foreclose and start fresh. The research that we do will basically lead us to the opportunities that we've gotten, the deals that we've got. Well, why haven't they figured it out? Like, they're only delinquent just a little bit. Like, they're gonna be okay. The tax suit just started. They're gonna be okay. As in, we're completely forgetting the initial shock of getting served and thinking that the only time they're gonna act is when there's an auction date or an order of sale. We can't think like that. So we rely on the research we do to basically lead us to the opportunities that we want to pursue ourselves.
What is it that you're looking for in all this information? What do you want to see triggers that?
Yep, so there's a bunch of things. We deal with properties that have death. That's what we look for.
Jordan, you're here today because you work in the distressed real estate, curative title world. I've spent a lot of time working with you in the last year or so, and I've seen you do a lot of really special things. Our podcast is about distressed real estate and making money from it. So that's why you're here. Welcome, Jordan.
Thank you, sir.
You got it.
Here.
So Jordan, tell me, I know you in a professional sense, but outside of that, who's Jordan John outside of messy real estate deals?
Ooh, it's a great question. Even I don't know the real answer to that, but when I graduated college, I have a business finance degree, a bachelor's in business finance. And I, like most of my peers, had no idea what we wanted to be when we grew up. And truly, I don't think any adult really knows what they want to be when they grow up. So it wasn't an existential crisis, I'd say, but it was something that weighed on me. And it actually got to the point where when I graduated, I still didn't know what I wanted to do, what I wanted to be. And I went into construction working for my father-in-law. And we renovated multifamily complexes all throughout the United States, typically 200 units or larger. So we would do all kinds of carpentry work, concrete and siding and stuff. And I started flipping homes on the side, and I started digging a little bit more into real estate, as in how do I get better deals? How do I get them faster? How do I get them cheaper? Just in general, how do I continue making money on the side so that eventually I can start working for myself?
So you had a day job with dad, but you were also dabbling.
Yeah. Yep. And this was years ago. I'd say maybe
like how long?
4 years ago, I think, 2020, because I graduated college in 2018. Yeah, 2020 is when I started flipping homes. Okay. And we started getting them from the MLS.
So at this point, though, you're like 21, 22, 24 years old.
Yeah, more or less.
Okay. That's young to have that fierce entrepreneurial drive. Usually folks get out and it takes a while, but it's fast.
Well, and when you go back, when I look at all of the steps that kind of got me here today, wherever that is, just who I am today, I attribute a lot of it to the way that I was raised, and then the work that I did working for my father-in-law to basically push myself and teach myself that I can do hard things. Mm-hmm. That hard things are hard because you've just never done it before. You don't know how to do it. There's always a better way.
Did your parents help with any of that kind of stuff?
Yes. Okay. A lot of tough love in the house. Which is good. I mean, it was a lot of get up and try again, do better. Not in a bad way or harsh way, but just
let's go.
Try better. Yeah. We know we raised you, we poured a lot of love into you. We know that you can do better. And so the work that I did when I was essentially a GC was I was given a job. It was all contract work. And it was basically up to me to hire workers, to make sure that the jobs were completed on time, stayed in budget, things like that. But it was ultimately up to me. If I failed,
true project management.
Yeah, it was. And not only that, but I was working with the workers. I am that type of a boss to where I don't feel confident in leading someone if I don't fully understand what to even expect out of them, what they should expect in the work that they're doing.
So were you not working for dad thinking, I'd like to do this as a owner one day? I want to go here. Did you think it was going to take too long? You didn't want your dad to be your boss forever? Why step out? Because
I don't know. I mean, there's always been an element of, I felt like there was not necessarily more in my life, because I did like the life that I was living, but I always felt like there was just more for me. I knew that I could do more. We traveled a lot for work, and having a young family, that was really difficult. We would drive 12 hours one way with
So you already were married and had kids at this point.
Yeah, one. One. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yes.
That's fresh out of school.
Yeah.
Married.
Thrown right into it. Yeah. And we did make good money, but there's always a trade-off. There's always that seesaw of you kind of get what you want, but at what cost? And a lot of the cost was just time being away from the family, things like that. So the way that it would work was we would work heavily in the spring, summer, and fall. And then in the winters, when it's colder outside, there's not a whole lot to do. So that's when I would do more of the real estate investing, the flipping, the renovating, things like that. But I would do the work myself.
Whew, slow.
I would do the work myself because I knew how to do it from the work that I was doing that, paid all the bills. And I didn't know really how to underwrite a property or how to underwrite a proper rehab budget. I just knew how much materials would cost and how long it would take me to do it.
Oh.
So I would do all the work myself.
Yeah, that's totally different than looking at a project, scope, schedule, and budget. What's it going to cost? What's my exit?
Yes.
What's my margin? All that. That's not.
No, this was very raw, so to speak.
Wow.
And we made so many mistakes. We came across properties that had zoning issues that we couldn't sell because there were multiple homes on one parcel. And we learned a lot very quickly. I wouldn't necessarily call them distressed deals, but it definitely was distressing at the time.
Oh, you were distressed.
I was distressed, yeah. So, I distinctly remember after some of these deals closed and we made the, 10, 20, 30,000 per house that I guess we earned. I remember buying into my first online real estate course, just how to do more. It was a group on creative real estate. So like buying properties subject to seller finance, things like that.
Okay.
Because that was new to me, coming from a business finance background, anything creative was colorful, it was fresh, it was exciting, it was new.
You've been classically trained like a dead-gum banker.
Almost, yeah.
And creative finance is like the underworld almost.
Exactly. So that's kind of.
Did you look at that stuff like, what the F is this?
Yeah. Like,
how's this
is
legal?
This real? Is this real? And sure enough, it is real, of course. And so I dabbled in that a little bit. All the while we are still flipping homes. I'm just trying to learn more, trying to do more. So we pivoted to more of creative transactions, creative deals, basically pivoting away from cash almost entirely for a period of time. And then almost pivoting all the way back to cash again, where we pivoted our business. So instead of focusing on people that had no equity or people that might entertain selling on a note, it was basically just, could we lowball someone essentially in a tight spot and pay them cash, quick cash to get them out of that situation. So we pivoted from essentially all organic marketing, from pulling lists on Zillow, properties that were actively trying to be sold, at least, that might not have had that option. If they had no equity, for example, maybe a sub 2 is their only option. We pivoted from that to almost entirely purchasing leads. So a lot of inbound. So we did a little bit of mailers, PPC, PPL.
Where did you learn how to do all these techniques, like the marketing techniques?
More coaching groups.
Yep.
So it's I like to think of my stars aligning, not that I was running away from things, but if I felt like it wasn't working the way that I wanted, I'd never forgot what I had learned, but I was never afraid to pivot enough to try and learn something new.
That's wise. So I find bright people change their minds a lot. And some of them are stupid, but a lot of the time they get access to new information. They start to build experiences, and they start to do better and better. So decisions have to get changed a lot.
And I think that there's a huge element of truth in that because, again, I wasn't trying to run away from things, but I always felt like it's not that there's a better way. There's a new way. There's a different way, something that might work out better for me or speak more for me, because I'm not a salesman. And I learned that pretty early on. So when you're purchasing these very expensive leads, and these people basically need to be coaxed to sell. They have to sell, and they know they have to sell, at least most of them. But you have to do that salesman. You have to be that salesman to eventually get them to commit and sign a contract. And I am much more of I don't know if pragmatic is the word, but much more of a just facts kind of guy. I'm like, hey, these are the facts. Whether there's a mortgage foreclosure or a tax foreclosure, or there's a lis pendens or an IRS lien or something, this is kind of your situation. the choice is yours, but let me know what you decide.
But I've got a service to offer or a price to offer.
Exactly. So I learned quite a bit about the creative world and then pivoted very heavily to the cash world. Again, focusing heavily on marketing, like SEO, focusing on our website and getting keywords, Google AdWords, Facebook ads, just kind of experimenting with what can we do to bring in the most cheapest and hottest leads over and over and over.
What were the hottest leads of all those that you tried?
We did more PPL than anything. PPC was difficult for us for whatever reason. I don't know if
PPL means you buy the leads from someone who originated them.
Correct, yeah. And PPC is we pursued a campaign and everything is essentially organic to us, tailored to us. So when I picked up the phone, if it was our PPC lead, they would know our brand name. But if it was PPL, they would just be assuming that it was an investor that.
Gotcha.
Does that make
Our
sense?
investor partner will call you.
Exactly.
And
I was the partner. Yeah.
So what would those deals look like? Are you remodeling those at all? Or are you just buying them and making a little money and selling them? Or
yeah, whatever. We did more remodels than anything. And truth be told, we were successful, truly. But as you know, with flipping, there's almost always some unexpected cost or unexpected hiccup or something goes wrong. Which extends the timeline, extends the budget, and eventually, when we got our HUD, it just wasn't what we thought we should have made.
It would always happen.
It always goes, right?
And it's not that you weren't good enough. That's just a common thing. Yep. Margins rarely grow in that business. They usually fade.
And one thing that I learned quickly was when you're flipping a house, you're always chasing for the top dollar, right? Because you never do all that work to settle. Like, okay, fine, right. I'm going to give you a good deal. No, like you are really trying to sell the best product on the market. And so you demand the highest price, which means almost always you deal with the most stuff, most requests, most crazy inspections that come back with a bunch of little things that even you didn't catch to begin with. So we were doing that, and I had actually come across you on Facebook, just randomly. Go ahead.
Some video where I'm walking around the house saying, I bought this piece of junk, and then we resold it. One of those.
But this was for your conference back in May of last year.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
In Dallas.
So,
me personally, I have always worked in Texas, but it's always been remote. Always.
How did you pick, of all places to do real estate, not your hometown, remote, and then of all the states, why Texas?
So when we started doing more of a cash model, inbound marketing model, we could operate virtually. Like we do not have to be local to do that because it's all about online presence. And so we looked at, most populous cities in the United States, and San Antonio was in the top 10. Go figure. And so we had been operating virtually in San Antonio for well over a year before I even knew your name.
Wow.
I've got a funny story about that, but it's, the lady that was working with me, her name is Christina. She actually happens to live about 10 minutes from here. And that was truly a coincidence. So I remember when Christina was working with me, she mentioned your name one time as someone who's in this area who knows real estate well. And I was like, I don't know his name. Like I felt like I was in large, not controlling, but influential groups at the time. And if your name wasn't there, it's like, he's probably just another up and comer, right? What can he do that's any different from all these other millionaires that are successful? 6 months go by and I see it was an ad for your event. Again, it was in 2024. And I'm like, I should try. What we were doing was working. We were successful, but I always felt like we were spending more than we were making. And that wasn't true, but I always felt like we should be making more.
Yeah.
It was like death by a thousand cuts with all of the marketing that we were trying to sustain and prop up to just keep our bottom line alive, essentially. It was almost like an uphill battle, unfortunately.
That business has gotten really tough as the market has matured, as that business type has matured, the industry. Mm-hmm. Now a lot more information is completely available, so it's happening faster. The environment is just so different. So you're right. You are fighting for every dollar.
Yeah. And it really did feel like a fight. And it almost got to a point where what I used to do, where I had a more stable job and we traveled more, but that almost felt more attractive because at least I wasn't spending so much per month just to make what we were. Mm-hmm. So I guess in a roundabout way, I mean, I could talk about my childhood, right? But like that's more or less the Jordan
that's what got you here.
Yeah, that's what got me here. Yeah, that's
That's a good segue. Let's go from there into you stumble across this dude on the internet. It's talking about doing crazy deals.
unbelievable.
Yeah,
deals.
unbelievable. And you say, I don't know if I believe that. There are a lot of crazy claims out there. Most of them are untrue.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah.
So what's next? You say, I guess I'll go to this event. Here's my $500. Let me get a ticket.
Yeah, $500. So we drove 12 hours one way from Colorado. Stayed at my sister's house. She lived in Plano. It was like 30 minutes from the venue. I distinctly remember where I sat. I wasn't too far from the front, and I remember going throughout the day. And I had a little notepad with me, and I was writing. I mean, furiously writing because everything was so new at the time. Now I recognize your slides. I feel
I've seen this before. I know what this means.
Right. But at the time,
this is true.
Yes, I've got so many stories. I distinctly remember writing, furiously all of the notes, and I was just soaking it all in. And I remember writing at the top of the very first page, "Get ready." That's it. And I wrote that about halfway through the event because I didn't know what to expect in the beginning. But I was like, this type of work is so unbelievable that it works. It's life-changing, truly. So I remember I'm
very careful to say things like that because a lot of people say it changed their life. It's life-changing. Yeah. I'm so careful about that. But sometimes I can't help it because, I'm a middle-class kid that just came out of wherever the hell with not rich parents, with none of that. And it was life-changing. And sometimes I can't help but say it. And I don't want to be categorized all those people that lie about it.
Right. Right. And I'm more than happy to go into how it was life-changing, how difficult it was, but that it ultimately worked out for us. And I mean, 100%, it has been the most influential thing that has ever happened to me besides getting married and having kids.
That's big, dude.
Not even going to school.
Wow.
Not even going to college. I don't use my degree.
Dude, I love to hear that.
So
I love this.
Right. So we went to this event. I remember. And
you walk away like, holy cow, these are pretty crazy claims. Mm-hmm. But it seems like it's not a lie. Like, what was your thoughts on that part?
Yeah, well,
I'm curious because I've actually never had this conversation with anybody.
Right.
Did you walk away saying, dude, these guys seem credible, or, I got to dig more, I'm not sure? What was your thought?
There was a little element of both because it is far-fetched in a way to strategically use the principles of an escrow, basically a title underwriter, an insurance policy underwriter, but use it to purchase real estate. Use it strategically to know what you see when you're abstracting, essentially. I remember that there were a few ladies in the front. They were sitting in front of me, and I believe they worked for a title company.
Oh, and yeah.
They were chiming in and like, yeah, that's true. Or like, no, there's a certain, if and or but about that scenario. And I'm like, whoa, like other people know about this. And I almost felt like I was alienated because I looked around and I'm like, does everyone else understand what they're talking about?
Interesting.
Because you got to keep in mind, this was all brand new for me.
Sure.
So hearing y'all talk about it and then other people chime in the audience that I also didn't know, had never seen them, didn't know their names. I'm like, maybe you're not just writing the book, but you're using the principles that have been established to operate your business. So I remember, again, this is like all of the stepping stones that kind of made me who I am. We had one deal in particular that had closed about a week before had closed or was closing about a week before this event. And I distinctly remember that once the event was over and you guys mentioned at the very last second, like, oh yeah, we're going to do a coaching program, whatever. I approached Lucian and was like, Lucian, I didn't know his name at the time. Lucian, what does this look like? I need to get in. I feel like this is the next thing that I need to learn more about, or this is what I've been missing entirely. I wasn't sure yet. I wasn't sure at the time. But keep in mind where I had gone. I pivoted so many times, not full 180s, but I'd say 45s, just like slowly.
We have so much that every year too, we modify, change, move.
Right.
Yeah.
This to me was just another way to learn more, another way to buy properties. I guess just to kind of round us out as a business. This deal that had closed, it was a wholesale essentially. We got a good deal on it. It just needed to be cleaned out. The lady wanted to sell quickly. We sold it on the market, and our net was just a little bit more than what the entry was to get into your coaching program. was like, how serendipitous is this?
Ah,
It worked out so well. So we joined the coaching program.
so hold on a minute. Let me back up. When you say
Yeah.
we, should you and your wife? Or did you say you had a partner?
Christina. So
Okay,
I
got
do
it.
not have a partner. Like I
it.
am the sole owner of the business that I own and operate, but Christina is very much in a part of our day-to-day decisions.
Got it.
I run everything by my wife first, of course. So my wife, again, was there. She drove the 12 hours in Texas. She stayed with my family. She stayed back while I was at the venue and learning more about your coaching program and just how this acquisition model works. And then the 12-hour drive back, we left early in the morning.
She heard about it all 12 hours.
The whole way. I'm like, Shay, this is wild. Like, let me tell you about some of the crazy stuff that I heard about. And she's like, listen, if you feel like it's the right thing, you've had enough success in your life, you've had enough.
She said, I trust you to make the right decision.
Yeah.
Whatever your decision is, do it.
Yeah, you've had enough success in the things that you've tried for me to believe that you can do it again. And if it turns out to be a
exciting.
flop, then you could always go back to what's worked.
Dude, and that's cool to hear. That's a new storyline that I've not heard. So, God, okay, that's good.
So
what happens? You get back home. Do you have any projects still open, like pending at that point?
yeah, so we did. Your coaching program is a few months long, so we were still actively buying and selling and renovating and flipping all the while because the coaching program, because there's so much information.
Yeah.
And your coaching program is awesome, but it is still 10% of what actually you learn as you're in the business model. There's no way there's no way that you could functionally compress this business model into a month or two.
It took me at least a year or more side by side, day to day, to train each of the partners here.
Oh, yeah.
But when I had decided to do this, I asked myself, how do I get just enough information to get them capable of buying deals and reselling them with profit?
Right.
And there's years worth of experience they're going to get along the way.
Right.
But how do I get them 120 days to profit?
Yeah.
And I really had to sit down and pluck out the things that were the highest priority, and everything else is going to get on the job training, learn along the way.
Right.
But it was just the important stuff, and now we got to get on the phones.
Right.
So I will agree with you there.
So I'll tell you what, I mean, there are other people in the coaching group that have done really well, aside from us. But the way that we were positioned, right when I learned about this business model, when I heard about your name for the first time, when I learned about how this operates, it was me, it was Christina, who lived, she worked virtually as well, because we would invest in San Antonio, but I never expected her to go walk a property or anything like that. She worked virtually. She did.
Wow.
And then I have a virtual assistant who helps us with all of our data, scraping and sorting and cleansing and stuff. And that's still how we look today. It's three of us.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's three of us.
That was going to be a question coming, but there we go.
I'm more than happy to dive into that too. But we pivoted so fast and so hard when I distinctly remember when we shut off all of our marketing and the
Were you
credit.
scared to shut down what was working for
I
you?
was, but I was more excited to stop spending money.
A lot of people say that. When you have that consistent marketing bill, some months are good, some months are bad, but they always have the same bill. People don't love that.
So we pivoted hard and we pivoted fast, and we had enough of a pipeline at the time that I knew that we were going to make this work. I'm like, not that if Logan can figure it out, we can do it too.
You had runway.
Correct. Oh,
One to end and one to start, kind of some overlap.
And we always had runway. That was one thing that when we flipped homes, we did well, but I was exhausted. I mean, it's a lot of work. Like, getting to this point is difficult. It's hard. And I don't even know what this point means, but just more confident about my next few steps. Getting to where I am today has been extraordinarily difficult. I'm oversimplifying, glossing over a lot of late nights, a lot of stressful conversations, a lot of hard decisions. But getting to where we are today has been, I mean, it's the path less traveled for sure. Would I do it again looking back? Absolutely. But would I do it again not knowing where I would end up? It was very, very risky.
Interesting.
Very risky. Now, when I do look back, truly, my life has been such a blessing. When I do look back, and I look back at all of the people that I met in the other coaching groups that got me here, it literally was a miracle that I heard about you. We were primed for this. I had the perfect little team to pivot fully. I know we're going to talk about this business model more, but Christina turned into more of a researcher and I was more on the phones.
Interesting.
And
And you say you're not a sales guy.
Yeah, exactly. But we'll get into that. It just worked out. It just worked out. And I'm telling you what, it just worked out.
When you have the right people, the right places, the right timing, it's funny how things just work out.
Yeah. So we were used to working virtually, which y'all do, 100%. I mean, sometimes you'll go visit properties, but most of the time you have no intention of seeing anything.
Right.
We were already dialed with that. We were comfortable on the phones because we did have to be more salesy. Now, Christina was more that role, so we did pivot. It was interesting. But turns out she likes the researcher role more than anything, and I don't mind the phones because I don't have to be salesy. I don't have to.
That's something that I really like about this. And I told y'all this, and I'm sure you remember it specifically when we started. Guys, I'm not a great salesman either. I'm not a born salesman. I've learned some skills, but that's not my thing.
Yeah.
But I just enjoyed this because it's more fact-based. It's more performance-oriented. It's more technical. And I didn't have to be salesy. I could be honest and transparent and explain all this stuff to people. And it was so ultra-logical that was almost a sales pitch.
Absolutely. You wait. I almost all the time when I'm on a phone call, I give the sellers, because we're so confident in this work now, I know the options they have. You got option A, B, and C. You pick. You pick. It's up to you. This is your situation. You get yourself out. We can help, but you have to pick. That's the whole sales. That's about as salesy as I'll get.
You know, it's interesting though. You start to have a talk track. People ask for scripts a lot of times, and maybe we could put together a script, but I prefer folks to figure out what's important to them and they build their own talk track. I have mine. Kyle's got his. You kind of got yours. So you kind of fall right into that same. You could probably write your own script now with bullet points.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
If I would have handed you one of ours, I don't know that it would have felt quite so good.
Well, I remember we made a script in the beginning because we came from more of a sales position where there are scripts to make sure that you stay on track, you ask the right questions. You focus more on the emotion than the actual situation.
Yeah.
All of the sales questions that are tailored to get those reactions out of the sellers or heirs or whatever. We had a script that we created for this distressed model, and I didn't like it very much. It felt clunky because every situation's different.
Yeah, these conversations wander, and there's a lot that you don't know, so it's hard to stay on a talk track exactly when you have this fact pattern going.
Exactly. So we joined your coaching group the second that we could pivot, and we did shortly after. I think after the first month or so, we pivoted almost completely to shutting off all of our marketing and figuring out what a tax delinquent list looks like. Trying to pronounce Linebarger.
That's all I know. Tax. So the year before, I've asked you this before, but I'm going to ask this for folks that are listening. The year before we worked together, you made, what was roughly your income?
150, maybe 200,000 or so.
And then, gosh, we aren't even 12 months from completing the coaching program. If you were to roughly tally up your income since the program started, I don't know, last summer is when it was. Where do you think you're at now?
Money in the bank, about I'd say $500,000 or so.
Wow.
But we have bought literally millions of dollars of equity for pennies on the dollar.
Yeah, there's two things. So you have retained earnings, you've got inventory that's been converted into cash, and then you have this equity on your balance sheet. A lot of times, I don't do this often, but every once in a while I'll sit down and say, what was my economic production of a year? Obviously I have the profit that we realized that we created, but in addition to the cash, I'll run a fair market value report on the balance sheet and say, how much equity did we pick up? How much cash did we convert? That's your profit. Right. And I'll look at the economic activity that I have for the year. So for example, I remember doing it one year and I earned about $1 million in net profit, but I picked up $2 million in equity.
An additional.
So I looked at that year as a $3 million in economic production, although it took me 6 more months to turn that cash. That was about $3 million. Now that was years in and all that, but the point is you combine them and that's your productivity.
Do you want to know what we did in our first 6 months?
Yeah.
Almost $3 million.
Oh my gosh.
Almost $3 million.
So that means you converted about $500,000 in cash and picked up another couple million in equity that you're working towards.
Correct. Now,
wow, that's incredible.
Now, I don't know how you would look at this, but I'm a millionaire on paper. And I have been for about 6 months. And that's wild. Like you hit
these phases. The first one is I want to become a millionaire on paper, net worth.
Yeah.
Then you'll do I want to make $1 million in a year. That'll happen.
Yeah.
Then you're like, I want to have $1 million in cash. You'll hit these.
Correct.
These things will happen.
And a lot of those will happen this year, just based on where we're headed.
Dude.
But we went from not a whole lot, I mean, more or less average. We were relatively high earners before just because we're willing to risk buying and selling a house. I mean, you are expected to make a decent amount if you're risking that much capital. And we were decent operators too, but this business model is unparalleled. I mean, we were millionaires in 6 months.
What I think is interesting is, yes, you do have a program that works, and I've seen it work so many times, so I feel very comfortable. But you guys showed up and you were very open-minded. A lot of people say, how could that work? If it works, why do you sell it and tell others? And I'm like, well, fuck it then. Don't believe it. I'm not trying to convince you. If people like it, do it. If not, okay.
Yeah.
But you're very open-minded. You're already a hard worker. You've got the IQ, the bandwidth, the attitude, the aptitude, and the bandwidth. You have all those things. So when you show up and mix them with a program that's worked really well, I know this sounds strange in hindsight, but what do you expect?
Yeah. Right? There's an element of that too. So, this business model, in terms of an operational perspective, it is a complete 180 degrees in terms of the marketing. And in any sort of acquisition business, marketing is the lifeblood of you got to keep the pipeline fat. You got to keep prospects, warmed up or in the hopper. And we pivoted, and I was confident in pivoting so quickly because I knew that it's not that we were shutting off all of our inbound marketing that we were paying for, but immediately starting a new source of lead gen, which was the tax delinquent list. So I like to tell people that this business model, one of its advantages is there are low marketing spend. There's very little marketing spend.
I know people that got $20,000, $30,000 PPC budgets every single month. We buy this list that costs a couple $100 in a county, and we'll burn that thing for 6 months.
Right.
It's incredible.
Right. And so what I like to say is, although we have a low marketing budget, we more than make up for what we would have spent on marketing in time, because cash conversion cycle can be a little bit longer.
Right.
And lawyer fees, litigation,
legal.
That's the one thing that we didn't get nearly as much when we were dealing with properties that had clean titles. Right. So there's a trade-off. There is definitely a trade-off, and we've seen it too. But I would much rather carry on the distressed model and know that a lot of our expenditure is just going to be legal. I don't know when it's going to get wrapped up, but
yeah. So when you're spending the money on the marketing fee, you hope it creates a deal. You hope it causes that. When you're spending the legal dollars, you've already picked up some equity, and you've got a position that you're spending towards perfecting.
Exactly. To make it real.
Yeah, it's different.
Very different, right?
Yeah.
So I felt more confident in pivoting quickly because I knew that if we were to start spending money on our leads, it would be in a direct result of trying to make that equity real, which is great because we already had our foot in the door. We're not spending money for fun on a deal that we don't own anything in.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting shift for me to say, yes, we are saving money up front. Sometimes it costs a little bit more. Sometimes it takes a little bit more, but we're just not spending as much, and we're converting quite a bit because there are a lot of people that need this type of help.
From the old types of businesses, I say the old type, the traditional like wholesaling, investor buying flip houses, all that stuff, running a marketing arm of your business, folks are always so interested in KPIs. Did you make 65 calls today? Did you have this many warm conversations?
Right.
How many contracts? What percentage of those contracts closed? Everybody is so into these KPIs. And like when I would do this on my own with just one assistant and that was it, no like real support, if I could make 20 calls a day, I was happy. I would do a couple deals, 2 or 3 deals a month. And there was a time where it was by myself. I got to nearly $1 million a year in profit. And it was me and an assistant.
Yeah.
And I didn't have any KPIs. And I would just do research on 20 properties. Then I put them on the yellow pad and start calling all 20 till I got a deal. Then I go do the deal.
Yeah.
It was so...
And then start over again. Right?
Yeah, it was so unsophisticated. It was so low track when it comes to KPIs and the metrics.
Right.
But I could laugh and say, gosh, my friends that I went to high school with that became doctors, I make more money than them.
Yeah.
And I'm over at this yellow pad calling people that owe money. Like, what?
Or people that literally have no money, people that don't want to be found.
Right. So
right.
When I look at the old marketing, things were so heavily focused on, or the other people's marketing, all these metrics, and it's a mature business. Everybody's calling on it. You got to be perfectly productive.
Yeah.
You don't have any room for error. Everyone's good.
Yeah.
Everyone's been sales trained. Like you got to be perfect, and you need all that. Here, it's more like the Wild West. There's not the competition. You don't have to be like that. Maybe you can apply those methods to it, but we don't need to get that complicated to do well.
No, yeah.
It's a huge shift from that to this.
Correct. Now,
what CRM are you using?
Podio and Google Sheets.
That's okay. Yeah.
Nothing sophisticated.
We use Podio in almost all of our office except one business line uses Salesforce. Otherwise, it's Podio, dude.
Podio.
Yeah.
Yeah, malleable. You can make it what you want. Tweak it as you
Not
go.
super expensive. I agree.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
If you're dealing with some massive operation that has tens of thousands of leads monthly, you got to be careful. Here, you just got to keep track of a few things. Not bad.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
And with these leads, if you're using tax delinquent, you'll clear them out more often than some people when they buy data and work the data for a county for like years. We won't do that.
Well, you want to get into lead gen?
Yeah.
Okay, because I could talk about this for forever. So, because lead gen is it's one of the biggest questions that people ask is like, okay, you're doing all these deals, right? You talk about all these big numbers. Well, how'd you find them, right? Like, how do you do this over and over again? How is it repeatable? And like you've said, there are multiple partners.
The deals you do will be like the unicorns to the average person. They get $100K deal once a year.
Yeah.
And you're like you're shopping for those. That's all you want to put in your cart.
Yeah.
So they ask, how do you find it? Where are you going for this?
Well, there's an element of if there's not $100K net, it is risky. It can be risky because of the unforeseen things. If you're not abstracting properly, $100K can go so fast, and then you're upside down.
Your margin can fade. You can make mistakes. It's not what you thought.
Correct. So the way that we work, and again, all of your partners, like you've said, they all work completely different. You teach them how the business works, and then tell them to go and run with it. You kind of see their own personalities bleed into the work that they do, the way that they hold their conversations and things like that. One thing that we do that we take a lot of pride in is we will take a tax delinquent list. It could be a main MSA. It could be a tertiary county. Both of them are great. There's a difference in profile of people that we've found in the tertiary counties. Like if you were to go clockwise around Dallas, for example, all of the counties that circle Dallas, most of those conversations, we think, based on what we see, they will literally be different than if you were to call someone who's lived in Dallas for forever, a city slicker. So like just they're typically more sophisticated. I'm not going to say a little sharper, but maybe just a little bit more educated about how these types of things work. So
yeah, that makes total sense.
We'll pull a tax delinquent list.
So tax foreclosure, tax delinquent.
Delinquent.
Okay.
We do not pull foreclosures.
So there's pros and cons, but the tax foreclosures, you got to know what you're doing. You got to be ready. They move freaking fast, man. Grab that Bronco, it's running.
Yeah.
When you do tax delinquent, you have a little more time. It's a little easier, slower pace. I kind of like that sometimes.
Right, and there's a huge difference in profile for the heir or the person involved on the other side based on the tax foreclosure list or the tax delinquent list. There's very, very, very little pressure for a person in the tax delinquent list to do a whole lot. And I'm talking about this is after.
See, that's interesting because that's where all of your leads come from. And
correct.
While they're delinquent, I mean, there is an element of possible motivation. If a foreclosure day isn't scheduled, they haven't been served yet, where's their motivation? So you must be doing something right to bring them across the line.
100%. Our secret.
How do you bring them across the line when they have not as much motivation as you would hope?
Our research.
You're establishing. Go ahead. Tell me why.
Our research. Christina and I are relatively picky. There are certain things that we look for. You know, in this specific office, I have heard so many times today about people that are getting folks to sign that have an auction date in less than a week. Right?
I know. It's like breakneck. It's stressful.
And the conversations are very, very different because I'm listening to them. The talk track is very, very different from what I would call, how I would handle it, because we don't call that profile. Typically, we don't call that profile. We'll take a tax delinquent list. We'll sort it just the way we want. So if there are tax lawsuits that are attached to a delinquent tax ID, we'll typically prioritize those a little bit more.
Why would you typically prioritize them a little bit more?
We have always thought that if a county were to take the time and energy to start a judicial lawsuit to try and foreclose, there has been an excess in neglect, an excess in intention. They basically feel like that property has been neglected to a point where it's never going to solve itself, title issues or not, that they want to foreclose and start fresh, essentially.
That's an interesting perspective. Also, the tax delinquency means they've gotten letters in the mail. When a tax lawsuit happens, that means a sheriff has come out and delivered personal service to them, most likely.
Correct.
When sheriff comes to your door with a lawsuit, says you are being sued, there's an element of motivation that starts to materialize there.
Correct. Absolutely. And these are all steps that we have become very familiar with in almost the profile. I keep saying that, but the profile of the person that we are about to get on the phone. So
what is that profile?
It's fascinating is what it is. It's very different. So I'll get to that. The research that we do, these lists that we'll pull, we do filter them very specifically. We have our VA that will spend weeks sometimes on an export just to get it just the way I like it. If there are tax suits that we can filter by, we'll do that first. But we have had an extraordinary amount of luck pulling a tax delinquent list in a tertiary county where there simply are not enough tax suits to even warrant our time. So we won't filter by that.
So if you would have pulled the tax foreclosure list, you'd say, man, there's not a lot of activity here. I could go somewhere else. But because you're looking at the tax delinquency list, there's more there.
And think about it. If there's not a lawsuit, but someone is just behind on taxes, how likely are they to sell at pennies on the dollar? We don't know. We really have no idea. A lot of times these lawsuits will come out and the petition will have a little bit of basic information to say, is the owner of record passed away? Do they know where they live? Are there unknown heirs? Or can they serve the person? And did they serve that person? That tells me they're alive, especially if it was a recent citation date. So we'll pull a tax.
Now, for folks who are unfamiliar with this, you're getting the citation information, the defendants' names. You're getting that from the docket reporting tool for the county.
Correct.
Which is where you're looking at the judicial tax foreclosure pleadings. You're looking at that in the docket tool right there, seeing what's been filed, what does it say, what do I learn?
And where is the lawsuit today? The local county docket for whichever property we're looking at is always open. It's always an open tab. It's a tab that we use frequently, always. So the research that we do will basically lead us to the opportunities that we've gotten, the deals that we've got. So I'm not going to say overthink because there's an element of this business where
be careful.
Yes. It's such a dangerous thing to start getting into these. I don't want to say sellers because we come across heirs more than anything. But these heirs' minds to think like, well, why haven't they figured it out? Like they're only delinquent just a little bit. Like they're going to be okay, right? The tax suit just started. They're going to be okay, right? As in, we're completely forgetting the initial shock of getting served and thinking that the only time they're going to act is when there's an auction date or an order of sale. We can't think like that. So we rely on the research we do to basically lead us to the opportunities that we want to pursue ourselves. We are much pickier than I would say most of your partners.
What is it that you're looking for in all this information? What do you want to see that triggers that?
Yep. So there's a bunch of things. Taxes have to be owed. I would say, would you not agree that is the largest stressor, the largest motivator for most of these people to do anything? Otherwise, if there were no tax auctions or taxes due, they'd sit on it for forever, right? There's no motivation to do anything. No consequence. No recourse. So they have to be tax delinquent. Now, how delinquent depends on the list. We like to chase properties that have title issues. So unlike your partners that will often bark up properties that have an auction date that's pending, but a clean title, that's not us because their list is so much more niche. We're dealing with the entire tax delinquent list in a county, the entire thing.
That's a much bigger data set to assimilate.
So everything that they're focusing on, if we were in that county, we would have that. We would have that tax ID. We would have that lawsuit. But if the owner of record is alive, per se, we will probably stay away from it.
If the owner of record is alive, you might not call.
We might not call, even if they're 3 days away and they are still the owner of record.
Really?
We won't. But what we will call on is default judgments, one way or another. Could be an order of sale, essentially. Default judgment, granting the order of sale, and the owner of record is alive.
Okay.
But they don't live in the house or it's a piece of land that they don't live anywhere near. I will call those default judgments just to say, hey, wasn't sure if you knew.
It's going to happen.
Just to let you know. Just to let you know. Seriously, it's just to let you know I'm a good neighbor.
What kind of response do you get from people when you just tell them to let them know?
50-50. They're like, none of your business. We've got it handled.
Yeah.
Or
and they don't.
Tell me more. Tell me more. What do you mean there's a lawsuit?
Those are the 50% of the people that are actually willing to work with you.
Correct.
Many times.
And I need to put this above my desk. Volume negates luck. Always.
Mm-hmm.
I have had so many no's and then I get a yes the next day. It's just how it works. But going back to the research. So that's the one thing that I feel like we're the most proud of. We deal with properties that have death. That's what we look for specifically. So yes, are we alienating a different group, a different profile of heir or seller by only focusing on one thing? Yeah.
That's okay.
I'd say so. There's a lot out there.
But that's the good part. It's still rather large data set.
Yeah. So there's a little bit for everyone. No matter what you're looking for, there's always a little bit for everyone.
Folks have asked me, why are you training, like in some of our programs, we say, you're training people. If you're making so much money, why don't you just shut up and go do it and not tell anybody? There are so many deals. There's no way, even with triple the resources, we come close to scratching the surface. I love telling people because we get great JV deals and we build a hell of a community, but we'll never scratch the surface. And then they say, that's what we said about wholesaling 10 years ago. But the hurdles to wholesaling are so different. Guys that are not really that great can hire some VAs and get some marketing and stumble across enough deals. If you do that times 10,000 people, you can change the market. This takes more time, more thought, and not just the average dude or gal is just gonna become proficient.
Correct.
So I think it's different.
So that is 100% the research, right? Just piggybacking off of that. The research.
That's like a sliver here that you can't just pay for very well.
No.
But if you're gonna pay for it, you have to figure it out and train someone to pay them.
Right.
That's the part in the wholesaling model. People buy data, skip trace it, throw it over the VAs, get the calls, then bring it back to me, and I'm going to warm lead close it.
Right.
That part you're missing is that research. That whole process breaks down at the research part, right in the gutter.
Yeah, 100%. I definitely agree.
That's why you get a little bit more, like a little nerdier people in this part of the business.
Yeah, a little tweaky.
You got to be interested in doing that work. You got to be willing to and able to do that kind of, I don't know, more academic stuff.
Christina says curious. That's how she says it. As the researcher, her job is to stay curious and never take anything for face value until we have basically drawn our own conclusions. We don't let ad litems tell us what to think. Definitely not. We do our own research and we stay curious. So we look for properties that have title issues, and the common underlying denominator, I'd say, is death. That's the most common easily quantifiable title issue that we'll come across. We will search to see if their social security number has been reported as deceased, for example. We'll see if the petition knows if they're deceased.
Google search obituary in their name.
Exactly.
That's a good one.
Exactly. Probate is another. Because I'll tell you what, I would love to be in the mortuary business to figure out how a person actually dies. Because there are people that die. Their social security is not marked. They don't have a find a grave, but a family member will randomly have a birth or death certificate, and they were buried somewhere in Texas. And I'm like, how was that handled? That was handled very poorly.
The folks that have bigger families, more connected to people, more involved, they usually have better records because who writes the obituary? A person close to you.
Yeah,
it's not the coroner.
Right. Oh yeah.
So there are a lot of people that are just despondent, disassociated, and all those. And I sometimes can find very thin records on them, and I believe it's because of that.
Right. And again, this is like someone who died, they had a social security number. There is a death record because I've seen it. We will get it throughout dealing with the family, but there's no record of death anywhere.
Yeah.
And sometimes, the more you start doing this work, the more you start looking at things like, okay, when was the last payment? When was it? Like, there are certain counties where you can start looking at the payment history.
A lot of time it aligns with a time that you think a person might have passed away because they were the payer.
Exactly. So we'll it's almost like context clues to draw our own preliminary fact pattern to start asking, Christina and I will ask ourselves, like, do you feel like something's here? Again, you start
to be able to feel it. Exactly. Like you corroborate enough information, enough data points, or you start to form a heat map in your mind of, it's a deal.
Heat map is a great word. There are certain things that we look for based on the size of the family, how many people in the family have passed away, how many original owners were there. We can just start, we've done enough of these, we can just start to feel our way into a deal. We're like, I should probably get someone on the phone at this point because there are enough things that are lining up for us to want to speak to someone. So we will take a tax delinquent list, like a raw list. In Harris County, it's like 300,000 records. It's huge.
Oh, that's big.
It's huge. It's a huge list. and it has to be filtered down. And then Christina and I will go line by line, by line,
Wow.
by line.
That's a lot of work.
So oh my gosh, I'll tell you what, by the end of the day, every single day, I'm like cross-eyed. I'm like, shoot me now. Shoot me now. I am done. I don't want to think about work anymore. I am done. Like my 8 hours, because it's exhausting work. So we'll draft.
This doesn't sound like real estate trading. This sounds like, I don't know, like you're a quant locked away in a corner somewhere,
right,
researching for some like fund owner.
It literally feels like that some days. So we will legitimately draft fact patterns for every single record. Now, it doesn't have to be a full fact pattern, as in we've done genealogy work. If the owner of record is alive, the petition says they're alive. They are alive. They appear to be alive, or someone's been paying recently. More often than not, we will leave it alone. We will leave it alone. We want to deal with properties that have truly been neglected. That's what we look for.
When it gets to that point, people don't care about it. They've forgotten about it. They're writing it off. You're almost dealing with it like a pawn shop of property.
Happened yesterday.
And sometimes people say, that's valuable property. It adds a lot to their personal balance sheet. How could they not want it? Dude, I'm not a big musician. My friend Sheik over here, who does a lot of audio production, a lot of music. He loves music. I don't really love music.
Right.
Someone could ask, how can Logan not love music? Well, how can people not give a shit about dealing with a big property?
Yeah.
Not everybody's out about money.
Yeah.
And not everybody's out for equity. They might be interested in something completely different, and they want to get this out of their way.
Yep.
Just like I might want to get this guitar and amp out of my way.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
It's just a different thing. It's okay.
We have found, well, I'll get back to it. These lists are so massive and they're daunting, and it does take us a very long time to get through it. But
when you talked earlier about how everybody's rendition of this business will change after they've been trained in a formulaic way, this would be a rendition of we usually don't do this type of research and look at it this way. This is your version, but it 100% works for you. You're shooting 95%. So.
Yeah. We're on, Kyle's going to kill me for this, but in our heyday and when we're on pace and it's not a slow month, we're with them. Like we keep pace with Kyle, and it's just Christina and I working virtually.
That's incredible. It's a very small team to be that potent. Economically productive. Potent. Exactly.
Potent. I love that word. So the research for us is crucial. Now I like to envision almost like almost like divers. I don't know, I have this visual representation of the work that Christina and I do. We look under every rock. We do not discriminate. Once the list is sorted, it's up to us. And I say that all the time. If any of these are going to get solved, it's up to us to find them. These are properties that do not have lawsuits. They are on nobody's radar. Not even yours.
And you know what? People that are buying this data and skip tracing it and then calling, like the typical flipper wholesaler,
right.
They're not calling him because the owner of record is deceased. You're doing one layer deep. They are being skipped right over. If someone happened to call them before you, it was by mistake.
Correct. It was a fluke. Yeah, wrong number.
Would you ever imagine there's a place in real estate today where there are leads that no one else is calling?
No, that's wild.
Here it is.
It's wild. We'll get to that. I have so many thoughts. But I like to envision again, I don't know if there's a better way to envision this, but we're just looking under every stone. It's the phrase, no stone unturned, right? Every single record on that list is getting the same treatment. Now, we might tap out in 15 seconds if the owner of record is alive. There's evidence of a payment plan. Let them keep it. Let them go.
They don't need me here.
They do not need me, nor do I want to get involved.
Right.
I only want to get involved when I feel like I need to, and it's very specific things need to line up. We find things that we have weaseled our way, wrong phrase. We have bought our way into deals that we really shouldn't have because the amount of arrears were low. There's no tax suit. There might only be 2 people involved, and they might be original owners, but they don't talk anymore. And we can tell based on the petition, based on proximity, where they live in conjunction to the property versus the other owner. Let's call that weak link first. Let's just see what's going on. I want to talk to the one that's the most disconnected. Now, we'll use that same strategy if I know that there are heirs involved, right? Mm-hmm. I always want to get to the weak link first because they're the ones who probably have the least to lose.
They care less. They're willing to share more information. they're more disassociated. It's not a meaningful thing. Interestingly enough, I notice most times there's not that big of a difference from that person to the person that cares the most. In orders of magnitude, many times it's similar.
Yeah, sure.
But because it's the path of least resistance, they're willing to talk more and things are easier with them, it makes sense to start there. Then you start kind of peeling back the layers of the onion.
Right. And I've had, I think weak link in the family is, I don't think that's the right way to put it, but I love thinking of it that way because everyone owns an undivided interest. And the beauty of an undivided interest is they all have the same rights as each other, no matter how much ownership you have. Yep. No matter what. You could have 1% of a property and you have the same rights as a 99% owner.
That's right.
So I love that because I know that there's one person who might value their undivided interest less than the other. How's that? Better than weak link, right?
Fair.
That's my job, is to find out who that person is. And I like to think that because we can start to profile these people based on payment history, family dynamics, maybe censuses in the past we've come across, the youngest kid or the oldest kid, if there's a large age gap.
It's funny you say that. When some of the guys bring a project to me that they're stuck with, they're scratching their head, they say, "Hey, Logan, let's war room something." So I'm like, "All right, great." Walk in the conference room, grab a marker, and they start telling me, and I'll draw this visual representation of ownership and costs and all this kind of stuff. And I always ask, tell me about the people that are stuck, the sticky ones. What's their profession? What's their age? Where do they live?
Profile them.
Yeah,
right?
Profile these people. And half the time the guys haven't gotten there yet, but the other half they do. And I say, you can't ask me to make a decent decision because I don't have enough information. Go profile that person and come back.
Exactly.
I always want to know, you're going to deal with, and I don't know if this is just the way the world is, if you're going to negotiate with my 7-year-old daughter or a 45-year-old physician, or I don't know, an excavator operator, you're going to probably deal with them slightly different. Different personalities, all those things are different.
Or an attorney.
Right. Exactly. So I think understanding that background and to take that further, we've purchased from attorneys. We purchased from a extremely wealthy urologist in New Jersey a while back, a vice president of one of the largest land development companies in Texas.
That's cool.
He was officed out of Dallas. He was CEO. We bought a large undivided interest from him. We deal with people from the guy under the bridge all the way up to the ivory tower guy.
Yeah.
Everybody, no matter how rich, how poor, what ethnicity,
same pain.
They can have the same problem with their cousins or the same issue with a crazy family member, or it's still not worth their time.
And they just don't want to deal with it, right?
That's it.
And there's no value. So that's who we try to find first, is the person who values their undivided interest the least. And sometimes, and I beat myself up for this, I don't know everything. So I eventually just need to pick up the phone and call, right? There's no replacement for just dialing and trying to get someone on the phone, but we have been very, very successful in trying to take an extra 2 or 3 minutes, learning a little bit more about the family, the dynamics, the age differences. Are they all boys, all girls? Where do they live in proximity to each other and the property? That's who I'll start to try to call first, is the one that I feel like is the least connected.
And the reason you want to call all them so badly is because you believe at the end of that phone call, there's $100,000.
Could be. Yeah. Or more.
That would be one of those where we can clip it right before I say $100,000. When you're walking that direction, I'm like, oh, this will be a good one.
So that's the type of research that we do. But, we have found another thing that I take pride in is, because we're looking for death and we're very, 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 very good. We're exceptional at looking for death. We have found death where death shouldn't exist. As in,
what do you mean?
These types of people that pass away, and I always like to joke, they're dead in a ditch, buried under a bridge, maybe buried on the property. We've heard of that too.
Oh, God.
Right. People that die in non-traditional ways where there's very, very, very little actual record of death. Those are the types of situations that we enjoy the most. So at the highest, I guess the simplest level of death in relation to real estate, in relation to what we do, you'll come across properties that are in the estate of, right? The informal estate of. That to us, it tells us, obviously the county doesn't keep track of obituaries. They don't keep track of death records. Someone called in to say this person's passed away for whatever reason. 9 times out of 10, they're starting a probate.
How do I make good on their tax account? Where do I send the payment? How do I change the name?
Yeah. How do I do courtesy of? How do we go about informally addressing this person's estate, before or without doing a probated will or an administration? We have had so much luck in, we will always do research on estate ofs, always. It's the low-hanging fruit. I know that there's death. How much death is there? That's always the question. We take pride in finding death where there's no record of it. There's no estate of.
The way I listen to you talk about this is as much like a sport as anything.
It is.
That's why you're good at it.
And that's why we take pride in our research, because that's what makes us so good. We call people that have never been called before, that really shouldn't be called, but we took the extra steps in finding evidence of death. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll look first by obituary. If I think an owner of record is dead and there's no evidence of it, we'll start with an obituary first. Then I'll go to find a grave. Then I'll go to the probate. And sometimes I'll look for, because if there's no record of death, you don't know where they died. Typically, people will file a probate in the county where they passed. So we'll look at some of the major MSAs in Texas.
Typically, they'll die where they lived.
Exactly. Or where their address history was. We'll look at that. If they lived in Harris for a few years and then Dallas and then, San Antonio, let's say, then we'll check probates in each of those main counties. Ancestry.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Ancestry, social.
For $30 a month, there's a huge amount of information.
Ancestry, I'll tell you what, Christina has found death in places where it shouldn't exist. An owner of record that died in 2007. Their estate was never handled. There's no probate, no evidence of death, nothing. No one knows they're dead, except their social security number was marked dead. Not necessarily in anywhere else that we could find, but in Ancestry because of some government program that they were a part of that they stopped.
They stopped receiving some kind of benefit,
it could
maybe,
be.
or an enrollment.
It could be,
was ending.
correct.
That's
correct.
Interesting.
And that's the only place that we found death. That's it.
Wow. So
that's it.
Your research is really good. It's interesting. Everybody picks a different thing to get good at in this process, and that's why they do really well. But that's a huge part of this. But when you get to that part, the next step is strategic.
Yeah.
Is business case.
Yep.
Walk me through that part, because that's the part where the deal gets done.
Correct.
That's where the money happens.
Correct. So we will not dive that deep on every deal. When we're talking about even a list that has 15,000 prospects and all of them look equally good. They're all tax delinquent. Some of them have tax suits. Some of them don't. The tax suits could be new. The tax suits could be old. We don't really prejudice in a county that we feel like Christina and I can handle the entire list. We really won't sort it much. We'll just start from the highest arrears and then start working our way down. And that's another thing is we have found the properties that often have the highest amount of arrears, the family knows about it. They don't want to do anything about it. They got their head in the sand. They're not too worried about it. And they have been called by other people.
Yeah.
We find our meat in the middle of the list, or towards the bottom, actually, where you have to actually work to get there.
That means fewer people are doing that.
Right. So again, we have developed a sense of, I feel like something is here. And so it's interesting. Sometimes, most of the time, we do our very, very deep dives. We don't know what we're going to find, nor do we know what we're looking for.
Isn't that funny? That's just one of the few places where you don't know what you're looking for and you don't know where you're going to find it. You just start looking.
But you feel, the signs are there. You feel like something's there. And so Christina and I guess devil's advocate, we have put together so many very long and intensive and hours of research and fact patterns and family trees that turned out to be complete duds. Either we discovered too many heirs and people keep dying, it just gets bigger and bigger.
I don't want to deal with 45 people. Well, just because you could doesn't mean you should.
Exactly. And that's a huge, are we comfortable enough to take on this deal or not? There are way more fact patterns that we put together that never pan out than the ones that do. And that will always be the nature of this business. Yeah. You will always get more no's than yeses. Always.
That's common in a lot of businesses.
Yeah, for sure. But whether you tell yourself that this is a no and you back off because the research is just too hairy or the family just doesn't want to work with you, you never know until you're there on the phone or you know what you're looking at.
So walk me through some of your calls. Your research this is fun to listen to because it's remarkably different than the way we do it. But you've done the research. Now you're getting on the phones. What's this look like? What do these conversations look like to these people? How long are they?
Yeah.
Are they surface level? Are they heartfelt? What are these calls like?
So once we locate, let's say a dead person, right? We see a break in the chain of title, an original owner that dies without a probate.
Oh, let's back up. A break in the chain of title means there's missing vesting instruments. A person had a deed that would be the vesting deed, the last deed of record that might be to Jordan.
Yep.
But there's a break in the chain of title because there's no deed to the current owner. You're missing that. So to fix that break in the title chain, you could have an affidavit of heirship. You could have a probate.
Yep. Executor's deeds.
Executor's deeds, maybe a judge's order conveying property,
Correct.
things like that. So you've got to fix that break in the title chain is what you're saying.
Right, where the owner of record or the last owner of record has passed away, and there are heirs, but they're not 100% vested, nor are they proven.
Yeah. Well, so in Texas, the way the law works is the person who inherited the property inherits that upon the death of the decedent. So they immediately inherit, but they're not an owner of record. There's no proof of that publicly.
Right.
So you don't really have good title. It's clouded.
Correct.
Can't prove it.
So once we find an obvious break in the chain of title, let's pretend it's one of these difficult to find death cases. So we'll find someone that's passed away and we're loving it, right? We actually do celebrate. Like, wow, we found something here. There is a way that we can help, right?
Now, at this moment, you now know someone owns property that most other people don't know.
Correct.
You have information that's not very well understood by people.
And sometimes it takes an hour to find that. Sometimes we can find it in a few minutes. Other times it takes regrettably too long for us to find it. We're too deep, and then I'm like, let me just call just to see if we can help.
I was the faster to get on the phone. I'd dig and I'd just say, let's call. Let's go. I would get just enough information to figure out if this is the right person to call. And I'd let them give me so that it would get me going on the right path.
Right. We prefer, because there's so much, now there's so many ways to do this. That obviously worked.
A lot of ways to skin this cat.
We have such a large data set. I need to know, can this be a deal, right? The perfect fact pattern means nothing if no one wants to play ball. And we've learned that so many times.
Right.
Yeah. So
that's right.
If we find our hard lesson, right? You're like, I know this is a deal. Let me call. And no one wants your help. And you're like, okay, back to research again. We'll find a break in the chain of title, something obvious, something we can quantify, right? Something we can see. If it's not in land records and we know it should be there, we've got an issue. That's when we will start calling. So the conversation it's very, very simple. Every conversation is different, but we've done this enough times now that I can more or less control the convo to where I want it to go, to get information out if I'd like. So it would be something simple as, hey, I'm trying to reach Logan Fullmer.
Who is it? Who's asking?
Oh yeah, my name is Jordan. I work with a group of title practitioners based out of San Antonio. We do a lot of genealogy work throughout the state of Texas. Do you know the names Jordan or Ben?
Now, what is it you want?
Oh yeah, we do this genealogy work. We deal with properties that have title issues here in Texas, and we came across a property that has a tax suit that might be involved with your family. Do you know the names Jordan or Ben by chance?
I mean, they're my cousins.
Oh, okay.
I don't think they own any property though.
And then we'll start having the conversation about the deeds, what the research that we found, the tax suit, if they're trying to sue that last owner of record, like let's say Jordan or Ben were the owners of record.
Yep.
If the tax suit is trying to sue them, I'd say, oh, of course. That makes sense that you don't know about this. They both own a property together that is currently in a lawsuit for unpaid property taxes, and they are trying to sue these two people that have passed away.
So you're inquisitively opening up this conversation
to see how much they know.
Instead of saying, my name's John from All Cash Offer, and I'm closing 10 days and all that stuff. It's not that. It's okay. That part of the discussion is very similar to ours.
Yeah.
Very similar.
Yeah. It's again,
folks' guard is down.
Yeah.
You're sharing information so they know that like this is a real thing. But you're being polite.
Correct.
It's easy to talk to.
And a lot of times we'll pass along information that really only a family member would know.
Yeah, that's very interesting when you do that.
But
because they know,
right?
You know about them, and even if they're unhappy or they're feeling guarded, they are not going to hang up with that languishing out there. They want to know. They want some closure to this conversation.
Correct. I distinctly remember actually there was an heir. She was born in 93 and her mom passed away in 95. And the property was owned by her grandmother, right? So you had a grandmother that had a daughter that passed away very, very young. And then her daughter, the granddaughter, was alive. So that was the lady we were speaking with. And I was asking about this owner of record, this grandmother, who essentially raised this granddaughter because her daughter had passed away. And she was like, yeah, that's my grandma. What do you need to know? I'm like, yeah, we saw that it looks like your mom had passed away or something like that. So you might have some close ties with this property that you were raised in. Or that, that your grandmother owned.
Whoa, dude called me out of the blue and knows this?
Yeah, and she took it well. You know, a lot of people are like, ooh, how do you know that? We don't normally go that far unless I'm facing resistance, as in, who are you? What do you want? And I'm like, that's when I feel like I need to start proving, sniping with the info that we have. And I distinctly remember, you know, something that happened that was so unfortunate. She laughed and was like, how do you know that? Who are you? And it was a great conversation.
That's kind of cool. She's like lighthearted about it instead of mean and nasty.
Exactly. Now that could...
Did that deal happen?
We're still working on it right now. Okay. This was like 2 weeks ago. So she's hard to get a hold of. But the initial conversation was interesting. Now, if it pans out to anything at all, I don't feel so bad about it because there were very few angles, as in there are very few different family members that we could start hitting. And the research only took a few minutes for us to find it.
You went to the right person then?
Yeah. Yeah. So... the conversations that we have are relatively lighthearted. I am not a salesman at all. I know there are people that will probably resonate with that because not everyone is a natural salesman. Like I would say very few people are very, very good at sales just because of what it takes. I prefer to just pleasantly and strategically lay out the information that we have to guide the conversation, to having them look at all of the options that they have in front of them and make a decision based on everything we talked about and everything that they already know.
Gotcha. Okay.
So it's a relatively painless conversation. The biggest hurdle that we have is when it is so much new information, as in this is a very disconnected person. It can go both ways. They either want nothing to do with it or they want to learn more. They're like, I think I might get an attorney. And I'm like, you are more than welcome to.
You know, I think that's a nice time where I encourage that. Mm-hmm. And this is, to me, there's a fork in the road.
Yep.
A lot of the typical investor wholesaler type are less educated. It's just, I don't know, it's just how it works. And you don't need this. I'm going to do this. They try to avoid that and people can sense it. Even people that aren't super bright can figure that part out. Mm-hmm. So in that case, that's the time where I say that's actually probably a good idea. Having an attorney involved would probably help.
Correct.
I would be happy to talk to them. I think they're going to help clarify a lot of things that I might tell you that I don't know if you totally trust or not, but you having that person in your corner, it would really help. So that would be great. Let's have this conversation. Yeah. And when you go do that, take good notes.
Yeah.
When you go do that, I'm happy to participate, or you're welcome to have him call me. But when you do that, it shows that you have clean hands. You know, your palms are facing upwards. This isn't a game, and you're not trying to hide anything.
Yeah.
And people can sense that, and they lower their guard, and they have more trust because they know you're not trying to play a game.
Yeah, we've had heirs. And this is especially when we've already bought into a deal. So we own a partial share, a partial interest, an undivided interest in a property or an estate. And there are heirs that are questioning what we've done. And they're asking these questions about how can you do this? You didn't ask our permission. I'm going to get an attorney. And we're like, I am the biggest cheerleader for you going and getting an attorney because they're going to explain this to you just the way that I'm trying to, but you're not going to listen to me. And I don't blame you. You don't know me. Like if you feel comfortable doing that, they're going to tell you the same thing, going that route. So that's a really nice thing is a lot of times we'll come across these situations where I know they don't have a lot of options. And if it makes them feel more comfortable going to an attorney to verify everything that we've presented, a lot of times they'll come back, almost eager to work with us because now they know the true situation. They've verified it themselves and they realize that I'm here to help.
They went and corroborated what you've told them with an attorney or with a friend of theirs who's a paralegal or a real estate agent they trust. They went and corroborated this and they're like, Jordan wasn't lying. This is for real. I notice a lot of times people will get on Google and they'll say, I spoke to my attorney. I don't think I spoke to an attorney, but they validated what we said on Google. And I'm like, okay, all right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's we come across a little bit of everything, but we are large proponents of people representing themselves or having our attorney speak with theirs or us speaking with their attorney to say, hey, you can look up the docs that we've recorded in land records. This is the situation.
My contract has a provision where I agree to reimburse the counterparty for 1 hour of lawyer time. I know that's not a lot, but the gesture is what counts. And if they want 2 hours, fine. Who cares? I'll pay for it up to $400 an hour.
Yeah.
They can get an attorney and get a review. It's not a lot of time, but for 2 hours, $800, get the review and come back to me. Yeah. And I also noticed by making that an option, and it is in my contract, people say, wow, I don't think he's trying to hide anything from me. So Very transparent. Now, there is always the one person who is a jerk or has a bad relationship with a family, and they don't like what we've done, and they come up with some way to spin it and make it look like we're bad people, but they weren't on our conversations. If we get to that point in discovery, they might get to, if any of it was in a recorded location, or if we have emails or things like that, or text messages, they'll get a chance to read it and find out how we communicated and what we did.
Yep.
And their attorneys will get to deal with this there, and they'll realize, I mean, these guys are like normal business people. It's not what this crazy person spun.
Right. Or they'll go and talk to a probate attorney that says, you should probate this. And they're like, I don't have the money or the time.
That drives me nuts.
Probate it.
You know, I understand that when it's done through the probate court, you have a judge's order, and sometimes people rely on affidavit heirships and sellers commit fraud and omit people. And I've seen that stuff happen, but it's not like it happens ultra often. I mean, what do you got? A couple % of the time it might happen. So the probability of it hurting us isn't bad, but attorneys always want to say, send it through a probate court, even if there's no will.
Yeah, it's the safest way.
Man, I agree that it probably is the safest way, but 98% of the time you don't have problems anyway. And I don't want to go through 6 months worth of jumping through hoops
or more,
and some unknown amount of dollars when you can probably do it with an alternative to probate. Like in Texas, we have affidavit heirships.
Yeah.
You need a lot less time.
Yeah, I agree.
As long as you get good people. Now, for us, when someone is wanting to go the affidavit heirship route and we participate, a lot of times we'll want to do the backup research too, because I don't want someone saying, I got 2 siblings, there's 3 of us, and it turns out there's 6. I don't want to be lied to or cheated because I'm having a problem with the title company. There might be a claim. That's a hassle. So we validate that research, and it has happened over hundreds and hundreds, maybe 1,000 deals. I have bought a couple deals where the seller excluded somebody. We did research. We didn't find them.
Yeah.
It was a hard to find person. It
happens. Yeah.
What are you going to do? You know?
Yeah.
It's not worth those 1 in 300 times sending all deals to probate. It's not. Settle the deal and move on. But when it comes to procedurally, when it comes to a procedure and wanting things to be relatively smooth over time, going to the probate court every time ain't the answer. But the probate attorneys want it because A, it's perfectly safe. B, they get to make some money on fees.
Right. They're going to get paid too.
That's right.
Not conflict of interest, but a vested interest in pushing them that way. So
that's right.
It's interesting. And most times I would always urge a family, if there is a will, go ahead and probate it. It is the most surefire way, especially if it's very shortly after the original owners passed away. And the taxes aren't anything crazy, or at least they could handle the taxes naturally, and that's not a big problem. They can pay them during the probate. It's not a one size fits all for sure.
Right.
And I think that is what our research has just grown to be so good at finding, are these situations where a probate isn't really an option anymore based on the facts that we find. And I know that we can help. I know that we can help quickly. And that's how we're able to do the volume that we do, is we speak to the people that need to be spoken to, that are not on a list anywhere.
So first off, we've gone through leads. We understand how you pull data, what you do with that data, how you turn that into telephone calls, what those telephone calls look like. Let's talk about your day-to-day. What's a normal day for you and Christina in separate locations?
Right. So we work remote. We talk through Google Meets. We always start.
Do y'all just leave it up all day?
Yeah. It's because we can talk to each other just live. Like we're in the room with each other. Sometimes the mics are muted if I'm on the phone, or sometimes if something's going on, she'll mute herself. But 95% of the time, both of us have our mics on. So like we can have that like tab closed, or we're just not looking at it. And while we're doing our research, we're just talking to each other like we are right in front of each other, or like sharing a desk. And it works well.
Wow, that's interesting.
Right? Truly virtual, right?
So first thing in the morning, like, do you have a standard day where each day we time block like this, or maybe for a week you're working on these things and then you turn, like, what's that look like?
Yeah. So every morning for the first 30 minutes of each day, we'll briefly cover the day before, some of the deals that we're juggling, some of the fact patterns that might need a little bit of help, or people that I'm like, oh, I need to reach out to this person because I haven't spoken to them in a few days, or weeks even. So we'll review kind of like what our pipeline looks like. And if we added anything yesterday, the day before, we'll recap. But we always like to start our days out with gratitudes. What are we grateful for? All right. Good. And a lot of times it's that we work remote. It's that we have this freedom, the flexibility, the ability to basically do what we want when we want, as long as we're putting in our hours. After that first 30 minutes, that's probably the only real structured time of our day. The rest of it is pure lead gen.
Okay. So then what % of your total time do you think is spent generating leads?
Christina, 80%. Me, 80%.
So many people, I say distressed property acquisition, and people always ask, like, What do you mean? It's just an acquisition model? And I tell them the majority of our time is spent finding and buying.
Yeah.
Cleaning up takes some time, but selling is the easy part. You call a realtor, bye-bye.
Yeah, it's gone.
You're spending the time looking for the leads that nobody else wants.
Correct. So I'd say Christina and I, we complement each other really well. So she is more of the researcher role. So she does dig deeper into Ancestry than I like. She'll dig deeper into land records than I prefer. And she even knows those resources better than me. I'm going to be honest. She does. She spends more time there. Not that I don't know how to use them, but she is just so much faster than me. So
when I say what's a typical day look like for you, you can very easily say lead gen because that's 80% of it.
It is. So for Christina, both of us will be working a list together. So she'll take a certain chunk and just go line by line, and I'll jump down and take a certain chunk and go line by line. And if either of us come across something that's interesting, we'll say, stop, come to me.
What is that?
Come to line 1500. And if she's there, then, she'll already start doing her research. And if I'm there and I'll go up to line 1500, I'll start doing more research on the people who lives there, right? What is the tax payment history look like?
So then you'll start attacking something together. You're war rooming it on the fly. Correct. Something just occurred to me. You're using a virtual workspace.
Yep.
You are using data that's very inexpensive.
Yep.
The programs aren't super expensive. What you're using is the labor and the technical information and knowledge that y'all have. That's the most valuable part.
100%.
But what does your monthly overhead look like? Round it to the nearest $1,000.
With salary or just in terms of software and data, let's say? Just the consumables, right?
Yeah, let's do consumables. A lot of small business owners round their salary into profit, and depending on how they look at it, it's different. Let's just talk about cash out of pocket to keep this thing rolling minus salaries.
2,000?
That's crazy.
2,500?
I know this because I run a business like it.
Maybe less.
But I like people to hear it from your mouth because in less than 12 months, you pick up $3 million worth of equity and you might spend a couple grand a month. Now, roll some salaries on top of this. Christina's got to eat. You got to eat. The business will make profit above your salaries, but you could run this for $100 grand a year, all overhead, all operating expenses, and potentially make a couple of $1 million in net annually.
Yep.
Working, how many hours a week do you work?
40. Both of us 40. So 80 hours combined. It is absurd, but I will always say
I love that. It's absurd.
I will always say the magic that makes us so successful is our attention to detail, our diligence. We show up every single day. Christina and I complement each other because some days I don't want to work, but I know she's going to show up. And she'll think the same thing about me. She'll be like, I'm tired this morning. And I'm like, well, I'm clocked in.
Just like you say, come to me on the lead list. That's also like that with a workload. Come to me. Come on.
Yeah.
It's you come to me come to you.
Yep. So by us, essentially, like we know our roles very well, but we will both be in the lists together and we'll only overlap when we find something that's interesting.
That's interesting. You're both working your own channel. And then when there's something interesting, you throw a flag up and say, hey, let's dive into this together because you get two brains on it all the time.
Immediately.
This is an incredibly collaborative way for you to do it. In our office, we're ultra collaborative too. People work in pods, this entity, that entity. And you got 3 people here, 4 people here. But all day when I walk over in Ryan's area, him and Ben are chatting about something. Yeah. It ain't talking about the shoe size or what they got for dinner. Like that's different.
Business.
Yeah. Same down in Kyle's office. Same thing. It's either y'all pick that up from us or that's just inherently what works best for this and you gravitated towards it anyway.
Yeah. So I like to think of our fact patterns anyways as twofold. There's an element of the ancestry or the ownership or the chain of title work. And that is an entirely separate function as opposed to who's doing research on the tax suit or who's doing research on the property. Is it vacant? Who lives there? Those are a lot of very, very, very different tasks and they can very rarely be done equally as well at the same time. So even when it comes to research, we like to help each other. So Christina will do a deep dive in land records. She'll do a deep dive in on Ancestry. I will try to find death if I can find it. Now, she's very good at it too, but if I can do anything to help speed up her research, I will 100% get there, jump on it, and do what I can to help us draw a conclusion as quickly as possible.
To go fast, go alone. To go together.
Yeah.
To go far, go together.
I have said this many times, and maybe you felt this, maybe you've said it too. This is a relatively sad and depressing business model, not because of the work that we're doing, but
How
because
much
of
death and disassociation is involved?
yes, it's very heavy.
I've never thought about it like that. Really, it's just a process. Like go through the process.
Right. And you can't let yourself get dragged down. But, there are days when Christina doesn't work or when I don't work and it feels slower because I don't have someone to vent to or I don't have their support.
We've
It's
had
hard.
some pretty sad stories. We dealt with some divorce where he was a bad dude and she was, I would say, a victim. And that was a nasty one. I remember that specifically. I'll never forget a house I bought on the east side by our old house. I couldn't figure out why this girl wouldn't probate the estate. Her and her brother were the heirs, and if she didn't, and she was the administrator or executrix, and if she didn't probate, there were like 15 of them that would inherit it, and she wouldn't probate that will. Brother was living in the house, she was living next door.
Yeah.
And brother signed a contract with me. He wanted to sell me his interest, and I had to go compel her to do the probate. And I'll never forget, she was just a nasty person, man. And one day she came in my office and broke down and cried for an hour about how she'd been assaulted by a bunch of her brothers her whole life, including this one.
Wow.
And the whole time I'm like shocked, frozen. This is a real estate deal.
Yeah.
I learned this was early on in my career, and it started to help me understand that these real estate deals aren't about the real estate. They're about the people. They're about their life. They're about all the things that have come with that. And I'm trying to resolve this property and unwrap it from this web that's around it.
Exactly.
That was a really, it's interesting. I don't think about that often, but there are a few times where I've really been in the middle of it. And that was a sad, sad day, man.
So we have learned, I feel like we learned this a long time ago where it very rarely has much to do with the real estate. When in these fact patterns, it has more to do with the family, like you said.
Dude, you're so right.
I'm glad you said it because
I tell people this is a people business that we trade in real estate.
Yeah. And I tell people I feel like a therapist when I'm on the phone sometimes.
Yeah.
But we deal with murders, suicides. We've come across, there was a property that had animal sacrifices.
Oh my gosh.
And just
Have you come across anything that would apply the Slayer statute yet?
no.
You know what that is?
I'm familiar with it,
If
but
a person murders if a person murders a person who they would then inherit from, they are not qualified to inherit from them. That'd be like you killing your dad, the king,
correct,
and you inherit. Well,
so
can't do it.
We bought out an heir that killed his mom, and that technically should have been triggered, but we still bought him out.
But he wasn't charged with it.
He was in a mental. No.
That's why
this happened during COVID. He pled insanity and was we dealt with the mental hospital.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was wild. But he killed his mom, which created the intestate issue because she didn't plan on dying that day. She didn't have all of her affairs in order, but it just happened that way. So because our research is good, because we come across so much death, we focus on the worst of the worst, I'd say. That's almost what we look for, not because we take pleasure in capitalizing off of it, but that's often where we can help the most.
Is there any way that if you weren't involved, anything that you see would cause these to be solved easier and prevent them from going to the tax sale? Is there any law that could change? Any funding group? Is there anything that could cause this stuff to not go to the tax sale?
Highly doubt it.
That's what I think too.
Highly, highly doubt it. This is what we do is very, very specialized, and we don't call anyone. We don't call everyone. And I like to make that point when I speak to people that are really curious about why am I calling you? And I was like, listen, when I made this phone call like 15 seconds ago, I wanted you to pick up, not your neighbor, not your coworker. I wanted to speak with you because you are in this situation. And I don't say this, but I don't feel like you are equipped to handle it because of the neglect that we have quantified, essentially.
You did a good job of explaining that in a way that's not really confrontational. Although those are very meaningful words, does it feel confrontational?
So because of the research we do, we come across the worst of the worst, I'd say. And so having someone almost to go through it with, because we are human. Like it is very difficult for me to not view these people and these situations as real, as in very painful. There are a lot of people that cry on the other end of the line because I'm digging up a lot of old wounds that they tried to suppress.
Tough. You're scratching that scab off.
Exactly.
And bleeding a little again.
So anyways, that's how Christina and I work together is I'd say 80% of our day is focused on lead gen, 20%, and it should be more, but I like our research. I like what we do, is calling. Me, 20% is calling, which a phone call can last a few minutes and research can take 10 or 15. But on an average day, I'd say it's 80-20. She does 20% research. If there's a fact pattern we like, she'll spend her time doing that, maybe a little bit more. and then I'll spend my 20-30% of the day calling to dig deeper. But
Nice.
most of the time, there might not be any death, or they don't need any help, or they don't want any help, and then we just move on to the next.
Then you're out.
Yeah.
Jordan, tell me about your favorite deal.
Oh boy, my favorite deal. This one did not have a lot of pain in it, thank goodness. It's my favorite deal for a lot of reasons, and it shouldn't have happened, and I'm grateful that it did. There was a lady that she was a sibling to the last owner of record. She had a brother who died owning 100%, and he never had any children of his own. He had a lot of siblings, but she was this lady that we ultimately reached out to. She was the only living sibling out of the 5 or 6 that had passed away. She was the only one that was still alive when this probate was written, or when the will was admitted. And so she was, this brother passed away giving 100% of his estate, his assets, which was 95% his house that was owned outright, to his younger sister. And they didn't know what to do because they weren't experts at probating anything at all. So this beneficiary, this heir, we'll call it, she put a family friend in this house because she didn't know how long the probate process was going to work, or how it was going to last. So they started the probate in 2019. They had issues verifying the will, as in it couldn't be reproduced in court or couldn't be produced in court. And then they produced it, or there was a missing page, and it took a year or two, but eventually it was admitted. And by this time, a tax suit had come out. The taxes were relatively low. They were about $5,000. I don't remember if the property was in the estate of, but we found a probate for the owner of record, and we came across, we put the fact pattern together and eventually called this beneficiary to say, hey, we think you might have something to do with this address. Did you know about a tax suit? You're like, what address? What tax suit? And I was like, well, and then we name dropped her brother, who was the last owner of record. And she was like, oh,
Johnny's house.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah. And then she went on to talk about how she'd never probated anything before. There was this family friend that she'd put in the house, basically to house sit, because the beneficiary lived a few hours away. This sister lived a few hours away. And because the probate took so long, the years went by, she couldn't afford the taxes. She had tried to get this family friend out of the house because she thought she was getting close, and the family friend didn't want to leave. And so you've got a combination of a tax suit, essentially an incomplete probate. The will had been admitted, but nothing else had happened after that. No oaths or anything like that.
Sitting, nothing.
It was stuck. And I think it was stuck for 2 or 3 years. Tax suit, taxes, squatter, and essentially a stalled out probate. This lady.
This sounds like a hassle. Why is this your favorite deal? Tell me that.
Because we sold the property for $168,000, and we bought out 100% of it for $3,000.
Bye-yow. 150 net after all costs.
Yeah. And
how long did it take from the moment you called this first call until the time you got paid?
4 months, I'd say.
That's a great cash conversion
We had to deal
cycle.
with the squatter, right? That was the underlying problem.
Did that become an eviction?
Yes, it did. Yeah. And it was a crazy one. It was a crazy
Really?
one. She was
What
throwing all
happened?
kinds of curveballs, saying that she owned 50% from a different owner of record.
She was hoping to get it kicked out of the JP jurisdiction, brought into county or district court, and be a whole new lawsuit, many more months.
It just didn't.
Did that happen?
No,
The
it didn't
judge
happen
was like,
that
"This
way."
is BS.
Yeah, so we already had a clean title commitment, as in,
Oh, nice.
like we felt confident in our fact pattern that there weren't any other deeds, or that he hadn't deeded out anything to anyone else by the time that we got our deed. So we felt good about it, and we just kind of went through the eviction process, and we went through the initial eviction, the appeals. They appealed it, of course. They appealed the judgment, and then it just got dragged on from there, and eventually they just got up and left.
At that point, they were delaying as much as they could for a small amount of dollars as paupers. They'll file a pauper's affidavit and represent themselves.
Yeah.
Get going, get an appeal for a small amount of money, and eventually they know where this is headed. I guess I'm going to get out. What kills me is in those cases, they've had years and years of free rent. And at some point I say, gosh, you've already milked this cow. Like, just go to the next cow.
Yeah.
They eventually feel that too.
It was a relatively nice house in a nice part of town, so maybe they didn't think that they could find it somewhere else, and that's not our problem. But I liked that fact pattern because the pain was there. We identified it. I made the phone call, and the next day I think we had all the signatures we needed.
Dude, that's fast moving, man.
It was.
You got all that done. Dealt with the slow part in the courts. Other than that, it's funny. You look at that and say, it sounds like a mess. It's a comment I made. But when you look at how it was executed, it's actually not a super dirty deal. It's relatively clean.
Yeah.
But you were able to spot that, and you were wise enough to be able to frame it well, to get a low enough offer accepted that it was worth your time in case it got out of hand and spent years in the judicial system. You wouldn't have gotten bombed.
Correct.
But you got lucky. It worked out great, and it was a good margin. Everybody went home happy.
Yeah, and I think this was one of those where I don't remember if the property was in the estate of. I don't think death was obvious, but we found a probate.
You
that
figured
was
it out.
That was the only real record of solid record of death was the probate, and that led us to who we needed to speak with.
Well, I've always heard people say death, divorce, all that kind of stuff is like where a lot of good deals are found, and that's true. So what's on the horizon for you, Jordan? A lot has changed in a very short amount of time recently. Where's this going?
We're continuing. We're continuing on. Christina and I take pride in the work that we do. I genuinely feel like we are making a difference for people that otherwise don't really have any other options or choices.
They don't have the representation. They don't have the interest. They don't. It's not going to happen without someone like you.
Right. So, Christina and I have mentioned over this last...
It's hard. Something I forget sometimes? It pays a lot. It darn sure does. But it's not at the expense of someone else. And the reason it pays so much is because it's hard work. It's very specialized.
Yeah.
If all of what you put into it didn't go into it, it wouldn't pay so deadgum good.
Right. Or if we weren't able to identify the opportunity, pitch it the way that we do, and ultimately help the heirs, we wouldn't be as successful as we are.
Now, I think it's probably harder to learn how to do like a heart surgery than it is this, but you're making 3, 4, 5 times what a doctor would in the same amount of time. It's interesting.
Yeah. So Christina and I, we talk about this frequently, and hopefully it's evident on this podcast, but we're very proud of the research that we do, and we feel like our research is getting better. And it definitely is.
Yeah.
It's getting better. So we're excited to see as we take this, I don't even want to say to the next level, but continue what we're doing, because I feel like we have a really good groove to see what we discover. Because
you're now developing. You've gotten to the point where you have a good level of competency and the revenue's looking good. Your expenses are under control. Now you're developing that skill. Correct. The next tranche, you don't know what that is yet, but you will know when it gets here because it'll be obvious. That's how our growth patterns have happened. Yeah. It'll just be painfully obvious. This is the time to do whatever it is you're going to do. But right now you're just sharpening that action, honing that skill set.
Finding our groove, getting more comfortable in the groove.
Hopefully building capital,
yes,
retaining some earnings.
Most importantly.
Getting that strength, because one day, while you think you don't need the excess capital, it will be important, I promise you.
Yeah. Well, I know you've got some stories about that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, we just feel more and more confident in the work that we're doing. And we're able to identify, I like to say these types of situations that we're looking for are very, very hard to find, but they're easy to spot. If that makes sense.
Interesting.
You know what you have when you have it, but oftentimes
you got to dig a long way to get it. But when you see it, you're like, that's a piece of gold in a bunch of mud.
Yep. It doesn't look like much until you know what to look for. So hard to find, easy to spot. And it's when you know this business model and you've been in the research side, I would say that rings very, very true. Because
I agree.
They all look like opportunities, but most of them
Jordan,
aren't.
What do you tell Jordan a year and a half ago? You're
it.
Talking to that guy a year and a half ago.
Do it.
What did you write on the top of your page?
Get ready.
Get ready.
Yeah, I would say jump in, hands down. It was definitely one of the biggest, most important things that I've ever invested in and poured time into. But again, it took, and I can so clearly look back at all the things that I had to do, all of the lessons I had to learn, the money I had to spend, the people I had to meet to get here. If I did this right out of college, I'm not saying I wouldn't be as good at it, but there'd be so many different things that I'd be missing that when I learned about this business model, when we pivoted fully, we were very well-rounded and ready to absorb it. Really, we were ready.
Timing definitely matters.
Mm-hmm. Timing's everything.
Now I'd like you to tell the listeners out there that might be new to this distressed property world, or are not even new, they're just watching and trying to figure out, is this for me? Should I do it? Do you have any advice for them?
Yes, you should do it. This business model has been life-changing for us. I like to think that we are an exception. We are very successful at what we do. We take it serious. I would say our secret to success is doing the work, which sounds so plain, but Christine and I show up at the same time with the same attitude. We do our work. We treat every day the exact same. We're curious. We're eager. We want to learn more. We want to help. If you try this business model without that same zeal, you're going to get burnt out very quickly, because Christina and I have had a lot of success, but there will be weeks and consecutive weeks where we find nothing, but we treat everything the same.
Dry holes every once in a while. You hit a rut. Sometimes you go through this period where it's like deal, and then you're drilling dry holes one after the other. You think, did I lose my? That was an
oil reference.
Saying, yeah. Did I lose my? Did I lose it? Do I not have it anymore?
Right.
Is it a bad time? And then
is the list shot
when it's the right time? Another one happens.
Right. So the diligence, I think, in treating every single record the exact same, with the same white glove, the same careful research, the same effort, has what's been the most successful for us. So shifting your mindset from, instead of paying for warm leads, people that are relatively interested in selling or even entertaining an offer, to no one calls you, everything is outbound, and you eat what you kill. And if you're not good at doing the research, or something just doesn't click with you, this would be a very, very difficult business model to succeed in if you're not willing to give it 100%. And there are a lot of hard workers out there that are hearing that and thinking, I can do it too because I'm good at hard things, or I've done hard things before. And I agreed. I believe that most people are capable of doing this business model, but keeping it alive for a long time is very exhausting.
A lot of work.
Very, very exhausting. And it is a lot of hard, honest work.
That's true. I've noticed in the last couple of years, I'm starting to get gray hair. I'm starting to get wrinkles. I didn't age a day over 25 up until 40, but now I've aged like 10 years. I can feel the difference, definitely. It's a lot of work.
Teeth falling out. Oh, God. Gut punch.
Well, this has been fun, Jordan. I appreciate you sharing with us and everybody else out there. Over this series, my goal is to get information out that isn't there. And I think you've done a great job about sharing what you've done, why you're good at it, why it's fun, and why people should do it. So thank you for that.
Of course.
When people want to look you up, because they might have some questions for you, they might want to bring you a messy deal in your area, where do they find you, Jordan?
Facebook. Find me on Facebook. Jordan Johns. Nothing super crazy.
Jordan Johns on Facebook.
Yeah, on Facebook. Yep. That's about it. I'm not super sophisticated enough. Very proud of the work that we do, but I don't put myself out there like I should. So I need to get better about that too. Maybe this is the push that I need to.
I'll help you with that. In the caption below, we'll put links to your social channels and your information. And awesome. Jordan, thanks for your time today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
My commitment to you is to deliver the most interesting, messy, and profitable real estate deals on earth. And in exchange for that, I only ask that you subscribe to this podcast and share it with a friend who can benefit. Let's dive in.